We need to stop just saying, oh my god, I loved this book. The twist was great. Whoa, I can't believe she did that or said that. Why? Why can't you believe it? Why was the twist great? What did you feel? What did you think? What conclusion did you make? Like, I love that you can't stop thinking about a book, but why? Tell me why. With social media and the rise of bookish content, it is common for a book to become hype, whether it's written by an influencer, has a jaw-dropping twist, or sweat-inducing spice. Readers, publishers, and booksellers pay attention to what people are talking about. But what happens when we overhype books? When masses of readers finally get their hands on the book that everyone's been talking about? I've been paying attention, and I've been noticing that one of three things happen. Readers are disappointed, publishers diminish books, often to a singular trope, and authors lose the plot. Quite literally. Today I'm going to dive into these concepts using two of my most recent reads. Both are 2026 releases. One is a satirical psychological thriller from a debut author. The other is a follow-up to a popular romantasy debut that had a very, very popular twist ending. Now let me start by saying a few things, a few disclosures, if you will. I typically stay away from the overhyped or even hyped books. There was something about these two books, though, that I'm going to talk about today that really just drew me in. The first is Yesteryear. That's that satirical psychological thriller. I actually rated this one pretty high. I think I gave it 4.5 stars. I was really interested in like the kind of trendy trad wife topic of this one, and that there was actually differing perspectives on what people thought about it. People either loved this book, or people like didn't get it or were adamant that it was overhyped. So I thought this one would be an interesting one for me to read as someone who historically thinks that hyped books are overhyped. Second book is actually like Wielder, which is the follow-up to Metal Slinger, which I absolutely adored. I definitely was caught in the kind of second wave of this book becoming popular. This one was originally self-published and then became trad published. And I really loved the unexpected plot twist at the end. I thought it was incredibly well done, and I almost never am gotten that good by a plot twist. And I like mysteries and thrillers to a certain extent, but don't read them often because like I never feel like they pack enough punch. And this one sucker punched me in the face. So I loved it and had really high hopes for the second book because I thought the first one was so well done. But the second one was not as well done as I was hoping it was. I think I gave it like 3 stars maybe like 3.25. So I'm not using these books as examples in this video because I either loved them or hated them. I just think that they're good examples of the points that I'm trying to make. Now, also, one last disclosure before we get into the video. I talk about themes in these books as I go through this video, especially in Yesteryear, and I consider talking about themes, especially in depth, to be spoilers. I know that some people are like, it's only a spoiler if you talk about the actual plot and the kind of resolution of the book. Some people also think that tropes are spoilers. I kind of fall somewhere in the middle. But I do think that some of the things that I will be talking about, in order to fully discuss why I think that these books are overhyped, I will be talking about some of those themes. And so just wanted to give you a fair warning that if you don't want to listen to those themes, maybe this video isn't for you, but I hope you might find another video that you like. So let's talk about the first thing that I think often happens when books are overhyped, and that is that readers are disappointed. This, as I've mentioned, historically has been me. And I think that people loving a book so much is actually the fallout for the people who feel that the book is overhyped. Especially in this example of Yesteryear. I think Yesteryear is a very interesting book, which, by the way, let's talk about what the actual book is about. So Yesteryear is about a woman named Natalie who lives in the modern world, and she is what is considered a trad wife influencer. So she lives a kind of conservative life upheld by traditional, typically religious values, and hers, they are religious values. They have a lot of kids, they live on a farm, they drink raw milk, and it's kind of this very, very curated influencer trad wife life that Natalie promotes and has made lots of money and gained lots of followers doing. As the story progresses, she has been transported back to 1855, where she is actually forced to live as a trad wife. So this book follows her in this journey. It is actually dual timeline, so you're always looking from Natalie's POV, but it is both like the modern day and the kind of past timeline of being in the 1800s. And I think that this book did a really good job of jumping between those timelines. Sometimes the jump even happened within a chapter, not even just chapter to chapter, which I thought was a really difficult thing to do that this book did really well. But let's get back to why I think this book is overhyped. So people either love this book and they talk about it mainly because of the unlikable main character, the twist, or the kind of trendy topical nature of the plot, but they kind of stop there. And I think this is the problem where when things become overhyped, it means that more people have access to it. And when more people have access to it, it means that more brains start thinking about it and why or what they like. And when I think, especially on bookish social media, where it is really hip and trendy and get you followers and get you eyes on your content, to just be a little bit more, not scandalous, but just like, feeling inducing, over the top perhaps, and I think that there sometimes can be a lack of substance and critical analysis in order to go viral. And virality is quick and intense and short and makes us feel something really, really fast, and also hopes that we don't think about it too much. And I think that when books become overhyped, it's often because people have basically said, this character is unlikable, or this book made me feel something, or it had a plot twist, and that's it. Like, we don't dive into like, okay, what did this book make me feel? Why did it make me feel this? Did I like this feeling? Was it a good feeling? Was it an uncomfortable feeling? What did I find out about myself or the world around me when I sat with that uncomfortable feeling? We don't really get into those things, and I think that's why readers are disappointed. Someone says that this book is amazing, and then you read it, and they didn't give you a reason why they thought it was amazing. So you might not have the same experience that they had. Keep it too surface level, and I think it leads to wrong expectations, missed expectations, and disappointment. And I want to talk about critical analysis for a little bit, because this has been something that I've been thinking a lot. I've been following a couple of new accounts on Instagram. Emily is Literate is one of my favorites. And they talk about this kind of concept of critical analysis in literature in the kind of modern reading world. And as I've been reading books lately, I've been thinking more about like, okay, what would my English teacher in junior year of high school have asked me to do or think about as I'm reading this book? And I think that in high school, a lot of the messaging was, what is the author trying to tell us? Those were the questions that we were encouraged to ask ourselves as we were reading. And I actually think that that's the wrong question. I think it is, what do we see when we read? What do we learn? What do we understand? What do we feel? What conclusions do we come to when we read? And I think that's a much more interesting question that I think would actually help with this kind of overhyped and discourse, and us also living in a more nuanced society, is really digging into, what do we get from a book when we read? What do we, and how can we report that back to the world around us? I think we have been encouraged too much to try to understand what an author's message is, or just to read to escape, both of which I think have value. Like, I do think that authors write to tell a story, and under that story is some sort of message. And I don't think that it's wrong for them to do that, or wrong for us to try to assess what that message is. And I also don't think that it's wrong to read for escape. I love to read for escape sometimes. Sometimes I just want a book to be the thing that I use to turn my brain off. That's great. But I think that we also owe it to ourselves as readers, owe it to the world around us, and owe it to the art that authors are creating for us to have some critical analysis towards the things that we're reading, at least some of the time. And especially with, I think, these books that are really making commentary on kind of things that I think are really important in this like world that we are all navigating, that honestly is kind of falling apart at the seams. I think it's great to be able to pull those messages, and I think it has to start with how we individually are experiencing things and being open to how other people are experiencing them too. And I think that Yesteryear does a great job of presenting the audience with lots of things to question. One of my favorite pieces of this whole book is Natalie herself. And I think a big criticism that people give this book is that Natalie sucks. Like, she is unlikable from start to finish. And she has no redemption arc. She doesn't really have any character development other than, like, perhaps devolving into psychosis. And, like, we just, like, don't get it. And I think it's because we're so used to books and plot and character development being the thing that gives us the message along the way. Like, Natalie's stubborn, and we love a stubborn female heroine in a romantasy. We find that that's beautiful and strong and brave, and as she takes her stubbornness and develops as a person, that stubbornness doesn't go away, and it's not that people around her just accept that she's stubborn, but it helps. She utilizes that to achieve some sort of mission, and that can be like the message that we take from the book. It presents us with the lesson. Natalie is not like that. We don't get the point from her. Natalie doesn't give us that point. It's up to us to take the lessons from it and to reason out not only what's happening in the story, but like why we're being told this story in the first place. And I actually think it's that discomfort that makes people not get it. I think the author did a really great job of making Natalie almost relatable enough in some small instances, but completely unrelatable in others. And I think there's a message there. And I think there's a lesson. And I think that's really interesting. And symbolism in the writing, especially around like the concept of God and Christianity and conservatism. There's a lot of undertones of when does Natalie feel God's presence. And it's really fascinating that there's like basically a sex scene where Natalie feels the presence of God, which is like really interesting because in Christianity, I think, you know, sex is often portrayed as a thing that is bad and evil unless it's done for the purposes of having children within a marriage. But the complete opposite is that, you know, pleasure and satisfaction and intimacy can also be like some of the ideal, most exciting human experiences. And that for some people is like closeness to God. So it was really interesting to see, you know, this very devout kind of Christian conservative woman have that realization, but also not realize that that's what she's having, you know? Like the whole time I'm reading this and I'm like, homegirl, this is what people who have sex are talking about. It can be great. And like, you're just having a good time. Like, this is called being satisfied. So it's just like interesting to kind of see that and see her like come to terms with parts of it, bits and pieces of it, but not get the message that is so clear to me as the reader and maybe other people as the reader that the author was like trying to portray. There were also some great points around kind of social media and the role of social media. Is it selfish or is it self-expression? Element of pretend and this concept of like, you know, people watching. That was like how her mom helped her get through this. Like, how do you do all these things and keep a smile on your face? She's like, oh, I just pretend. I pretend that someone's watching me all the time, which is another great symbolism of like God and a higher power and religion, if you really want to get into it. I think these like big philosophical questions are what I'm going to remember about this book. It's not necessarily the plot, although I do think it was very interesting, but it is these questions that come up when you look at the symbolism. And I think that's been a big critique of the book, is that it relies too much on symbolism. But I think that's a beautiful thing to rely on because we, as a culture, as a society, I think we're getting too much to the point where we want everything handed to us. We want to know what you're saying. We want to know what you mean. We want to understand the lesson. We want to understand the message. We don't want to have nuance. We don't want to have discussions. It is black and it is white. It is this or it is that. It is right or it is wrong. And symbolism forces us to sit, discern, question, discuss, come to our own conclusions, defend those conclusions, and accept that maybe someone else has a different interpretation. And I love that that book did this, and I also understand why people don't like it, because it's unusual for us to be presented with that, and especially when we talk about why something is hyped and why something is not. Okay, point number 2 is about how publishers minimize the complexity of a book or synthesize it into a trope or two, or maybe some genres. Let's stick with Yesteryear as an example. I looked at a few different places, a few different ways that the book is described, some Reddit threads, Instagram, publishers' descriptions, libraries, like what book lists are these is Yesteryear on? How are people talking about it? What are the tropes and what are the genres? I saw everything from contemporary fiction, historical fiction, sci-fi, time travel, humiliation fantasy, satire, psychological thriller. Like, it has been described in so many different ways. I think this is a very genre blendy book, which if you know anything about me, you know I love a book that blends genres. But I think it makes it confusing as a hyped book for readers, because based on where they might see what this book is about, they could be presented with an expectation that is not what they thought it was going to be. So if they go into this book thinking that it's going to be about time travel, there is a time travel element, but it is not the only big element in this book. And not having the total picture of the summary or the plot or how this book goes about doing what it says is going to do limits the way that you experience the book. If I went into this book thinking it was one thing and it was all those other things as well, it would be confusing to me. And it also means that I go in with an expectation on how I like a certain trope to be done. If I love enemies to lovers, which is what, let's switch over to Wielder. Wielder is an enemies to lovers story. And I think it's an actually interesting enemies to lovers story, but it's also not what a lot of people probably like. There are some people who want these people to hate each other from start to finish. Actually still be enemies, but also be lovers. They wouldn't like Wielder. Tropes limit the exploration and expand expectation. When we give something a trope, when we give it a box that we say it exists within, then we as individual readers expect it to fit in the box the way that we like it. That's how we determine if a book is good. Do we like it? And that's not necessarily how a book is good. A book, you can hate it and it still be a good book. Because what was the book trying to do? What is any book trying to do? Now that's a really philosophical question. What is any book trying to do actually? Other than get to someone to read it, to get someone to consume a story. So did you consume the story? Is that then therefore a successful book? That might be too philosophical of a question for me to get into right now. If you have thoughts though, please comment them because I would love to talk about that more. Now, the third reason. Authors lose the plot. Wielder is the perfect example of this. Wielder relied too heavily on what was successful about the first in the series, Metal Slinger, and just doubled, tripled, hold my beer down on it in a way that was terrible. So a little backstory on Wielder, which is the main book that I'll be using for this kind of third point that I'm trying to make. So Wielder is the second in the Fire and Metal, I think is what it's called, series. Metal Slinger was the first. The important things to know about this book are that there are a female and male main character. They are enemies from two different lands in the same world. In this world, magic is suppressed, and basically the girl is rescued from her land, brought to his land. They fall in love, and at the end of the book, there is a massive plot twist that basically turns the enemies who had turned into lovers back into enemies. Totally didn't see it coming. I adored the way that this book ended. I thought it was one of the best books that I had read either that year, I think it was last year or the year before, and so was just really excited for the second book. And as we talk about social media and the impact that it has on how books are marketed and even how books are written, because Wielder depended way too much on plot twists. The only thing that people really talked about when they talked about Metterslinger was the plot twist. I think there was some talk about like the love story, but there wasn't a lot of discussion, at least that I saw, about the world, the like plot outside of the plot twist, the character development, the magical system. It was really about how the plot twist got us all. And so in the second book, it felt like the author said, hold my beer. I'm going to give you so many plot twists, you won't know what to do with them. And you won't know what to do with them because I also am not going to set them up in any sort of way that makes sense for the story. I'm kind of just going to drop them on you. And it just didn't work. It just didn't work. Like, at one point, Acker, the male main character, has hated Jo, the female main character, for 4 years after they became enemies the second time. And then all of a sudden he's in a carriage to go to her land with his now wife and his like blacksmith and his blacksmith wife who's pregnant to go try to overthrow his father, who she had tried to overthrow 4 years ago, and that's why now they're enemies again? Just out of nowhere. And it's never fully explained like how he as a character got to that point. It's like kind of lightly touched on, but there's no like real character development, plot development, like insight into his brain on how he got from essentially point A to point W. Like he skipped B, C, D, E, F. Like he went to W, and we just didn't get any information about that. It tried to be what people loved about the first book and didn't think about what is the story that needs to be told or that I want to tell. And it fell so flat. We're being told all these things and we're not being shown all of these things. We're being shown nothing, actually. Jo basically sleeps through the preparation for the final battle. What? And we were in her POV while the war was being prepared for. And I think that's where part of the problem was. It's not only were we being told things but not shown things, it was that the characters were not hiding secrets from each other like they did in the first book. Like that, I think, is why the plot twist worked in the first book, is because there were characters who were hiding secrets from each other and from us as the reader. In Wielder, the characters didn't really have as many secrets with each other. They kind of all were on the same page for the most part. There was like 1 or 2 twists that the character like was in the dark about. But for the most part, the characters are all on the same page and hiding things from us as the reader. It makes me feel outside of the story. It doesn't make me feel integrated. I didn't feel for any of the characters for any particular reason. Like, it just felt like there wasn't any actual direction for this book until it became hype. And then the direction became, let's just take the things that people are talking about liking and drop so many of them in this book that maybe they'll like one of them and then therefore like this book. And I think that that is what made me dislike this book so much. I think a lot of hyped books right now feel like publishers and authors have realized that the way to get big is to be sensational, because we as a reader are going to sensationalize small aspects of a book with no depth underneath it. And I think as readers, we have so much power in not only what we read and how we talk about it and how we encourage other people to read and what we encourage other people to read. We have power over what gets written and what gets published and what gets noticed and what gets talked about. I know that people talk about diverse reading a lot. I literally have a diverse reader like banner behind me. How do we amplify the voices of diverse authors? And a lot of that is by buying them and reading them and talking about them. But I also think it is about respecting the depth and the craft of writing and the craft and the art of critical analysis. And when we overhype books without any depth and without any conversation and without any nuance, we do a disservice to ourselves and to this reading world and to writing and that art form. And I think that's really sad. All this to say, I hope that we can all start to have a little bit more critical analysis when it comes to the things that we're reading. I hope that when we hype up a book, we give reasons why. We talk about not only just that we felt something, but what we felt and what it taught us and how we're going to use that in our lives going forward. And I hope that we use our voices for more than just sensationalizing this beautiful thing that we've been given, which is storytelling and writing. Hope that maybe hyped books, I don't know what I hope about hyped books. I think they have a purpose. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. I've been yapping for far too long. But thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you got something from it. Let me know what book that you think has been really hyped lately and whether you loved it or hated it. I will see you all in the next video. Hopefully. Pretty please. Okay. Bye now.
Got me up on a late night. You steady playing on my mind. Oh, I can't get you out my head.